Nashville Public Radio serves Middle Tennessee in many ways every day, including through this podcast. You can support it by leaving a review or rating, by telling a friend about it, or by contributing at WPLN.org/give.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's August 28th, 2025. On this day in 1898, a North Carolina pharmacist decided to change the name of his special recipe wellness drink. Caleb Bradham had been selling his blend of enzymes and natural flavorings as Brad's Drink. He encouraged customers to use it as a sort of energy supplement with digestive benefits. And for folks there in his town who knew him as an expert on healthy matters, the play on the Bradham name made sense. But he felt like there was a broader market of people who would appreciate the beverage. So he decided to give Brad's Drink a new name that was more about conveying the benefit it had to offer. He figured it was a way to put a pep in your step. So he called it Pep Cola, which after a few years evolved into Pepsi. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Back when I first started at WPLN News, a regular feature of my job was having to listen to the earnings calls for a handful of locally based companies. And of those, I probably sat through more Cracker Barrel calls than anything else. Now, earnings calls are generally very dry affairs full of financial jargon, but there's usually a little bit of slightly more colorful discussion about the company's strategy with their main product. And one thing that would often be said on those Cracker Barrel calls 10 or 15 years ago was something along the lines of, we are trying this new line of menu items, but consistency is the most valuable part of our brand. So we remain committed to continuing the same base menu as always in the same physical environment that our customers expect. There might be different antiques on the walls from one location to the next, and the assortment of items for sale in the gift shop changes from season to season. But at its core, Cracker Barrel was built on the idea of an almost rigid consistency. Every location has the exact same floor plan. Store on the right side of the building, dining room on the left. A big parking lot with room for RVs. A porch lined with rocking chairs for sale, but also there for you to sit on while you wait for a table. Once at your seat, tables and chairs that could have been lifted right out of a farmhouse. All-day breakfast. Your choice of biscuit or cornbread. Stick candy for sale near the cashier stand. And that peg game to find out if you are an ignoramus. It was almost shocking when the chain started selling alcoholic beverages. It was news that we mentioned on our air when the company announced that it would be installing booths at some locations to offer a more comfortable seating choice. That's how much consistency and lack of change seemed to be baked into the brand. Still, I never would have imagined the fever pitch of backlash and hubbub that erupted in the last week over a new Cracker Barrel logo. The moment the world saw simplicity take place of the familiar, we all got a lesson in just how strong the longtime branding was. The world at large, from stalwart fans of the chain to people who hadn't eaten there in years, to the President of the United States, all seemed to say in unison, what were they thinking? Well, the thing about big companies is that you can always find out at least a little bit about their thought processes by poking around the investor relations portion of their website, looking through their press releases, and listening to the earnings call. There's actually already been a fair amount of change at Cracker Barrel over the last few years, but most of it was behind the scenes. A new CEO, new board chair, new marketing chief, the biggest test of new menu items in company history, and overall, what they call a strategic transformation plan. The chain's revenue wasn't bad, but it wasn't really growing either, and investors expect growth. Well, this March, Cracker Barrel announced it was hiring a trio of agencies to, quote, support its brand refresh and define what they called their evolved identity. On the June earnings call, there was talk of refinements that would appeal to both existing and new guests. The company started a partnership with NASCAR that kind of doubles down on the customer base that they've long been associated with. But as for attracting new guests, there's longstanding baggage with the brand. About 20 years or so ago, there were multiple discrimination lawsuits against Cracker Barrel. A federal investigation found evidence that the chain mistreated Black customers. There was a significant settlement with the Justice Department. And as many years ago as that was, mention the chain online and someone will still probably chime in with reminders of those cases. So you can see how the new leadership might see reasons to try to telegraph the idea that it's not entirely the same old Cracker Barrel. The earnings call also hinted at core aspects of the long-standing brand and experience that might challenge the investment market's growth expectations. The executives explained that about a third of the items they sell in their stores are sourced directly from China, plus all the Chinese-made goods they get from other vendors. So tariffs are a real issue for the gift shop side of things. They had to pay a premium for eggs during the avian flu flare-up this year, which has a pretty big impact on the breakfast-heavy menu. Meanwhile, one of the big areas of improvement they've identified is to just serve more customers. At a sit-down restaurant, that means trying to get folks in and out more quickly. But everything about the long-standing brand slows that experience down. There's a shop to keep you occupied while you wait for your table, but it also means the staff will have to wait on your party to regroup once the host has a place ready for you. That peg game makes the time go by while you wait for your food. But how many times has it also slowed the kids at the table down from picking out what they want to eat? Of course, for a lot of folks, that's what makes Cracker Barrel Cracker Barrel. And if the logo was changing, what else was going with it? Well, a handful of test market stores have been stripped of the antiques on the walls. It makes fiscal sense. Outfitting new stores in that decor has meant keeping a team of antique hunters on staff with a warehouse in Wilson County to hold their finds. Change the look, and all of that can be struck from the budget. Plus, every one of those farm implements has to be regularly cleaned, which is fussy work. The gray lattice on all the walls is a dust catcher, too. These days, Cracker Barrel is using AI to predict the ebb and flow of diners so they can optimize staffing. So, of course, they're also looking at ways to cut down on the amount of time workers have to be paid to stay in the building after the last customer is gone for the day. But what makes sense for investors is not always what makes sense for customers. And whether the company intends it or not, it is perceived as holding a particular spot in the nation's culture wars. So the reaction to last week's logo change was a lot of, but what even is Cracker Barrel if it isn't old-fashioned? With a heavy dash of conservatives accusing the company of going woke. Ultimately, after multiple messages saying they liked their new logo and would absolutely stick with it, thank you very much, Cracker Barrel relented on Tuesday. They'd held steady as the stock price went on a roller coaster ride, but when the president started posting about it on socials, that was all the blowback they could take. It's not yet clear if the chain is also backing down from decor changes, and there have been calls in major publications for CEO Julie Masino to lose her job. In just a few minutes, lethal injection is supposed to be a painless death. But when the state of Tennessee executed a man this month, he exhibited signs of pain. That's coming up after the newscast.
At WPLN, we tell stories about honoring our families.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away.
And preserving memories.
I never heard of a Rosenwald school. Nobody's never told me that's where I went.
I'm Char Daston, and my reporting connects you with your neighbors and the important moments in their lives.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. FedEx is laying off more than 600 workers in Memphis due to a giant auto parts manufacturer moving its business out of state. The layoffs at its subsidiary, FedEx Supply Chain, come after 200 other FedEx workers were let go this spring in Middle Tennessee. The Tennessee Lookout reports many of the affected employees can apply for other roles in the company and that FedEx employs around 39,000 people statewide. Final results are unknown in a nail-biter union election at Ford's electric vehicle battery plant in Kentucky. Only 11 votes swayed the election in favor of the UAW, but as Lisa Autry reports, the outcome is being challenged.
According to election results released last night, workers at the Blue Oval SK Battery Park in Glendale voted 526 to 515 to join the United Auto Workers Union. However, 41 ballots are being challenged, which could tip the outcome in the other direction. A statement by the UAW said it believes the contested ballots are illegitimate and, quote, represent nothing more than an employer tactic to undermine the election. Blue Oval SK says the outcome of the election depends on whether the National Labor Relations Board will count the challenged ballots. A statement from the company says it will urge the NLRB to, quote, count each eligible vote because every voice matters. Blue Oval SK, a partnership between Ford and South Korea-based SK On, has faced worker complaints over health and safety issues. I'm Lisa Autry in Bowling Green.
There's a new clue about the future of car racing at the Nashville Fairgrounds. Axios Nashville reports the Speedway Motorsports Company has inked a deal with a labor union for work building a renovated speedway. The deal is being reported ahead of any official announcements about the Fairgrounds Speedway. Union involvement could help the project win support when it goes in front of the Metro Council. There have been hints about an announcement, but nothing concrete. Meanwhile, opponents to racing have been preparing counter ideas. The intrigue follows years of back and forth about the fairgrounds and the potential for NASCAR racing alongside professional soccer and other fairs and expos. The next phase of construction is underway at Nashville International Airport. Now that the expansion of the D concourse is open, it's time to renovate the A concourse on the other side of the building. Alaska, Delta, and United Airlines are all temporarily shifting operations to other parts of the facility. The Tennessean reports the project won't impact the number of available gates, but when it's finished, there will be more than a dozen new spots for planes to take on passengers. Meanwhile, the Boring Company may need to pay Nashville's airport nearly $2 million per year. The company is getting free state land for the tunnel, but the Metro Nashville Airport Authority requested that the company pay an annual licensing fee to use airport land. That's according to documents obtained by the Nashville Business Journal. The Boring Company plans to build parallel tunnels between the airport and downtown. The route is roughly 10 miles long and lies under roads owned by the state. The state is providing the underground right-of-way at no cost to the company. The future of a rural hospital damaged by Hurricane Helene in September is looking bleaker. Unicoi County Hospital in Irwin was submerged during Hurricane Helene, sending more than 50 patients and staff to the roof. They waited for hours before being rescued by helicopters. Aerial photos of the flooded hospital attracted national attention. At the time, hospital executives said they were committed to restoring the hospital. Ballot Health, the company that owns Unicoi, started to rebuild with funds from FEMA, the federal agency that helps with disaster relief. Then came the passage of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, which slashed $1 trillion from health care and reduced Medicaid funding. Ballot is now exploring whether to open an emergency department in the region instead of rebuilding the hospital. Over a dozen bat species call the Mammoth Cave system home, 3 of which are federally recognized as endangered. An annual event coming this weekend invites the public to see them up close. Mammoth Cave National Park's Bat Day offers the public a glimpse into the conservation efforts underway at the world's largest known cave system, which is about 80 miles from Nashville. Researchers will capture bats live in front of attendees, collect data, and analyze their overall health for a routine population survey. Molly Schroer says the park is one of the best places to study rare endangered species such as Indiana bats, gray bats, and northern long-eared bats.
So we just look to see how many of those we find and capture and then can re-release into the environment. But it gives us an idea of how their populations might fluctuate.
Bat Day events begin Saturday at 10 a.m. Attendance is free and no reservations are needed, but park officials recommend bringing a flashlight. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
From WPLN News in Nashville, I'm LaTonya Turner. Tennessee carried out its second execution under the new lethal injection protocol earlier this month. The man, Byron Black, showed signs of distress and said he was in pain while he was dying. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the cause is still a mystery. She joins me now to discuss the latest. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, LaTonya.
Thanks for filling us in on this. There were concerns ahead of time about Black's heart implant. Is that what caused the pain and distress you saw?
It turns out that is not what caused the pain. So for some background, he had a heart implant, and there was concern that if his heart went out of rhythm in this specific way as he died, the defibrillator would shock him and it would be painful. The defense got a hold of his implant after the autopsy and took it to an expert to have the data read off of it. The devices store a lot of information, and the device said it did not go off.
So if it wasn't the heart implant, after all we heard preceding the execution, what was it?
Black's attorneys are thinking it was the drugs, and that could be one of two things. There's always a concern in lethal injections that it's going to be painful, even if it's administered correctly. These drugs cause tissue damage, especially in the lungs, very quickly. But it also could have been a misadministration. So I was a media witness. So they march us into this gallery, and they open the curtains to the execution chamber kind of in the middle of the process. So they have already strapped him down. They've already put the IVs in, and they're running saline, and then they open the windows. But his spiritual advisor and his attorneys get to be in the room a little bit before that. One of his attorneys, Kelly Henry, she shared that day some of the things she saw that we didn't.
The IV on the right side seemed to go in okay. There was a lot of blood from that site, but they cleaned it up pretty quickly, and I didn't see any blood continue to ooze. That was not the case on the left side. They clearly had a difficult time getting an IV on the left side. It took some time.
They could have gone into the muscle. That would have caused a lot of burning at the site. An autopsy would hopefully clear that up.
Will we find out what really happened?
Black's attorneys hope so. They have conducted an autopsy on Byron Black. That report hasn't come out yet. His legal team could do more investigating by, bringing in a doctor to review those records. The most intense investigation would have to be by the state, which has happened before here in Tennessee. Back in 2022, the governor found out the state hadn't been testing its lethal injection drugs, and the report spanned 178 pages. It was just really intense. But it's pretty unlikely the state is going to be taking on that kind of investigation with Byron Black. The Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti, tweeted shortly after the execution. Part of his statement reads, "Every death is a cause for sorrow, but Byron Black's lawful death came with a spiritual advisor at hand and a method of execution chosen to minimize his discomfort. That is far more consideration than he afforded 6-year-old Lakeisha Clay, who bled out during an agonizing crawl toward the room where her 9-year-old sister LaTonya lay dying, and her mother Angela was already dead by Black's hand." There really doesn't seem to be an appetite for follow-up.
That's WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney with a postmortem update on the execution of Byron Black.
Thanks for listening to the Nashvillager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.